My name is Jed Sonnenfield and I will be your host for this evening's event. And we will be covering the current status of some climate drivers, their impact and a forecast on the season ahead. This webinar is brought to you by the Northern Australian Climate Program, NACP, and John is the Southwest Regional Climate Mate, and myself as the DPI employee. I'm based in Southwest Queensland in Charleville, and I'm the Industry Recovery and Resilience Officer for Southwest Queensland. As we do make a quick start, we've just done a quick round of introductions, and as I mentioned, I am based in Charleville as an Industry Recovery and Resilience Officer, and I work with producers and communities for disaster preparation and recovery. Our presenter today is John McLaughlin from NACP. John is the Southwest Queensland's Climate Mate or Climate Project Officer. John has been delivering a version of this webinar since 2022 and has received excellent feedback, and therefore we are continuing to deliver this product. And we are looking forward to hearing from John again this evening. I would like to respectfully acknowledge Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders as the traditional custodians on the country on which we meet, and I pay my respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders here today.
Thank you everyone that's joining us, and thank you to those that are watching this recording. We've had well over sort of 150 views on this webinar for the past few years. So I think that people do find it valuable to sort of spend an hour and get insights into how the next sort of 3 months is looking and be able to make informed decisions about what they're doing on ground. So again, welcome to the Season Ahead webinar for 2026. Now, the old adage in the livestock industry in general is work hard and pray for rain. And what we're trying to do in this program is to move away from the pray for rain piece and provide a little bit more skill and knowledge when it comes to understanding how to interpret seasonal forecasts, more importantly, where to find them. And that's what I'll be running through today. In the next 45 minutes or so, I'll go rapid fire through everything we have available. It should provide you with a really good idea about what you might be expecting in the months ahead. Really quickly, what is NACP, the Northern Australian Climate Program, jointly funded between MLA, Queensland Government, and at the University of Southern Queensland? It's part of a broader drought and climate adaptation program, DCAP, through the Queensland Government, and it's got research, development and extension components. There's 16 of us across Northern Australia, climate mates or climate project officers, and I am the climate officer for Southwest Queensland, but I've been doing this for, it might almost be 7 or 8 years now, so quite well attuned on how to do this. The focus of the program is climate variability. It's understanding what your climate is, how that climate can vary, and then step 3, the ball in your court, how do you manage for this variability? Because as you know, I don't need to explain it to producers on the ground. Just about every decision or influence that you're thinking about on a day-to-day basis will interact with or be influenced by climate and weather conditions. Pasture growth, water availability, should you buy cattle, should you sell cattle, should you move cattle, should you rest country, your weaner management, your breeder management, disaster management, the big events, fire, flooding, how do you sort of see them coming or manage those events when you're actually experiencing them? When to burn, when to spray weeds, when to introduce pastures, everything will to some extent be influenced by what's happening in the season. So we're going to have a look at the season ahead, the latest climate outlooks and insights for winter in Southwest Queensland. It's a great time to do it, the first week of winter essentially. But before we do that, I'll define what I mean when I'm talking about Southwest Queensland, although if you're from another area and you're watching this, you'll get a lot of insights for the entirety of Queensland. You'll just notice that I'll pick out Southwest Queensland in particular, though most of the graphs will show the entire state. I'm generally going from about miles through to the border, south down to Thargomindah, and sort of as far east as Gundawindi. There's also Vicky based in Chinchilla, and there's a little bit of overlap, but this is a rough area that I'll be chatting about this evening. Now, to understand the months ahead and the sort of climate we're likely to experience, it's important to know where we're sitting at the moment. So what are our current conditions and how are we set up to experience the conditions in the seasons ahead? So a little bit of a rundown about what we're experiencing out in southwest Queensland over the last 3 months. So this is our recent rainfall graph. And as you can see, the southwest area there is experiencing a range of different conditions. Some of us below average conditions, some of us in average. And if you're right out on the border there, you're actually having a pretty good last few months of rainfall throughout autumn. So a bit of a mixed bag in the last 3 months, although the story becomes a little bit more clear when we're looking at 2026 rainfall from the 1st of January to the 31st of May. We've got a stronger signal of those drier conditions that many of us have experienced, particularly right down in southern Queensland and pushing into southeast Queensland. Very much below average conditions beginning to show on the map, but again, right out on the border there, quite a good season. And the more interesting part, the rest of Queensland, North Queensland, Central Queensland, Northwest Queensland are having a bumper of a year so far in terms of rainfall, even the whole way up to the Cape. And that signal's pronounced even further. We've got our 12-month rainfall here. Now we're beginning to get a really good feel for what condition our landscape might be in. And again, a growing extent of that below average rainfall. When we look on the left here, we're getting a sense of actually how many mils below the median or the average level that we have there is. And we're beginning to get in some areas more than 200 mil below our average or 100, 200 mil. So they're becoming decent and significant reductions in rainfall from our normal levels, and we will begin to experience and really feel that on the ground. But if we're trying to get an idea for drought and long-term conditions, we can look at the 24-month rainfall records, and this is picking up those bigger seasons sort of 18 months ago, and we're seeing a reduction in that below average condition. And the last 3 years, largely speaking, across southwest Queensland, average to perhaps slightly above average. So in the last 12 months, we've got a signal of drier conditions, but over the last sort of 24 or 36 months, it's been a pretty much average year, but not if you're in the north and the northwest. Bumpy years up in that part of the world. Now, if we look at serious rainfall deficiencies, these are our drought conditions that are existing in 2026. We can see a little pocket in southwest Queensland, and particularly northern New South Wales and southern Queensland. There's some really serious rainfall deficiencies or drought conditions. These are in the sort of bottom 5% of years for rainfall in some of those locations. So we're talking serious rainfall deficiencies. But if we're looking over the last 2 years, essentially nothing in Queensland is experiencing what we would consider real drought conditions, which is a good thing. Soil moisture. We're noticing now this signal coming across from this last 12 months of rainfall, the last 5 months of below average soil moisture across the region. Not the story for Central Australia whatsoever. A very strong soil moisture profile right out on the border there, if that's your part of southwest Queensland. But for the majority of it, it's either average or below average as at the end of May 2026. So going into this winter, a lot of locations are already a little bit drier in terms of their soil moisture profile, and we pick that up when we begin to look at our pasture biomass percentiles. So what's our current pasture levels across southwest Queensland in comparison to the same date, 31st of May in other years? And this red and yellow on the map is obviously not good. That's when we've got extremely low to well below average pasture levels across the region, which reflects our soil moisture profiles and reflects our rainfall totals for those areas. Not if you're in Central Queensland, not if you're in North Queensland, not if you're in Northwest Queensland, not if you're in Western Queensland or Western Southwest Queensland. But for the majority of our region there, we're beginning to notice some warning signs and a little bit more average conditions, sort of from the Charleville, Cunnamulla area, until you get further west into the better, the areas that have experienced the better sort of period. What's that doing to our grass fire risk? Well, we're getting to a point now where we've got moderate to high grass fire risk across a lot of areas. The exception to that are those areas with very low pasture levels, so low fuel loads, resulting in sort of low grass fire risk. So probably the upside of not growing a whole lot of pasture is you've limited your exposure to grass fire risk. But we're beginning to see in those areas that have received a lot of rainfall above their normal levels, they've got a lot of pasture out there for this time of the year. Well, what does that come with as we head into a perhaps drier spell? We're going to have an increased grass fire risk. So that was just really quickly setting the table for us. A snapshot of the current conditions in southwest Queensland. The 3-month rainfall, the recent rainfall, a mixture across the region. 2026 rainfall is generally below average, unless you're right out near the border. Then you're having a bumper of a year so far. And the same thing with our 12-month rainfall. Mostly below average, out at the border, you're loving yourself over the last 12 months. And then 24 and 36-month rainfall totals look generally average, unlike the rest of Queensland, though, which has received overwhelmingly favourable conditions if you're anywhere north of the southwest Queensland zone. Rainfall deficiencies, no major rainfall deficiencies, no one experiencing any severe drought as it stands at the moment. And soil moisture is heading or trending in the wrong direction. We're seeing more and more of that below average soil moisture appearing on the map as we get further into this year. And we're getting a growing area of sort of reddish colorations across our soil moisture map. The exception, again, the far west. TDSM, our total standing dry matter, percentiles as at the 31st of May, the Maranoa, the Balone, and the Gondawindi council areas, very worrying signs, extremely low pasture levels. We've got Peru at sort of that average level, and then as we head further west, we've actually got above average. So as you move from east to west, the story improves in terms of the rainfall and the feed on the ground. Now, we've gotten through that. We've gotten that out of the way. Now let's begin to look at the season ahead, winter. What does it look like? What are the forecasts telling us? Is there a strong signal? And can we use this information when making decisions on ground? The ENSO outlook, the El Nino Southern Oscillation outlook. This is a big one that everyone's always banging on about. This tells us, are we looking at a neutral year, an El Nino year, or a La Nina year? It's always the talk of the town when you're talking climate and climate drivers. And we are currently in neutral conditions for that. Although, as no doubt you've heard, there are strong signs of El Nino development. So the El Nino Southern Oscillation remains at neutral. The index value for the week ending the 24th of May is plus 0.67 degrees. Once it exceeds plus 0.8, we've exceeded El Nino thresholds. And as you'll see, we're sort of trending in that direction. And as you can see on this slide, there's been substantial warming in the recent weeks, and this warming is expected to continue in the coming weeks. All models, not just the Bureau of Meteorology or the BOM, forecast this warming to continue in the coming months. And so we've got agreement across the 7 or 8 international climate agencies that we reference when looking at this information are all sort of singing the same song. So what goes into the ENSO forecast is 2 different climate drivers. One of those being the Pacific Ocean sea surface temperatures, or SSTs. So this is one of the 2 drivers that we look at to determine, are we in an El Nino event? So even though we're currently at neutral, so May, the white circle dot here tells us where we are now. You can see what I mean by saying that we're trajecting towards El Nino conditions, and we're sort of right at that threshold, though still in the neutral zone. Although, as you can see, by June, they're expecting us to well exceed that threshold of 0.8. And so in the next week or so, it's likely that these sea surface temperatures will warm and cross over into those El Nino thresholds. It is forecasted to be a strong event. You might have heard, I forget the exact wording that's been used, a super El Nino, I think was the terminology. What that's referencing is how far above this threshold this event is likely to push into, and then for how many months is it exceeding that threshold for? June is quite early in the year for these thresholds to be exceeded. And as you can see, as far as the forecast goes to November, we're still in those El Nino conditions. You can also see the 100 different models that have been run, the variance within the system, and not one of those is predicting anything besides quite high up into the El Nino threshold. And so last year we had a very weak La Nina event where we were sort of just crossing over into these thresholds. This is quite a strong El Nino event that is being forecasted. And by the time we're in June, we've got pretty good skill. That's another word that they use in the climate game for accuracy for the months ahead. So we're in a position where we've got a bit of confidence around this forecast. This is the visual representation of what that means. And so these sea surface temperatures being measured are out here in the Pacific Ocean. And as you can see, a great amount of warming beginning to develop out in this area. And this is stereotypical El Nino conditions, where we've got a big body of much warmer conditions coming out from the South American coast. This is what you use when trying to explain El Nino and La Nina to people. The schematic you throw up to go, this is the most stereotypical events. El Nino event, warm body of water trajectory out from South America. In La Nina events, that actually becomes a cold body of water or a cooler body of water compared to normal conditions. So we can see quite clearly that we are in or heading right towards an El Nino event where we've got that warm body of water off the coast bringing moisture to these areas rather than bringing moisture to Australia. Now, I said there were two different sort of climate drivers that we look at to determine if we're in an El Nino event. The second is the Southern Oscillation Index, SOI. First one, Pacific Ocean sea surface temperatures. What is the difference in the ocean temperature? Is it warmer or colder than it usually is? This is looking at the atmospheric pressure differences between two locations. So you've got sea surface temperatures and atmospheric pressure as two indicators that you need to both be in El Nino or exceed their El Nino thresholds to call the event. As you can see, in this case, the negative events are actually those that are required for El Nino events. And as of the 24th of May, the SOI is at negative 13.4. Once it drops below negative 7, we're in El Nino conditions. So we've got the SOI well below that threshold, and the El Nino event in terms of sea surface temperatures likely to get into those El Nino thresholds by June or by this month. So an important thing to think about when we're talking about something as publicized as ENSO or El Nino is what really matters when it comes to specific climate drivers. And the thing that really matters is where and when. Where are you and at what time of the year are you looking at this event? Because El Nino has very specific impacts on certain areas of Australia at different times of the year. Let's look at the winter and spring rainfall and the impact El Nino has in winter and spring across Australia. This is its biggest impact by far, winter and spring rainfall. El Nino events are winter and spring rainfall influences, especially if you're in southwest Queensland. So this is using our El Nino years for the last, when's that going back to? 1905. So we've got 120 years worth of El Nino events to pick out of that. And as you can see, winter and spring rainfall across those years is generally in the second or third decile. So if you rank the 100 years or the last 100 years, these events typically produce your bottom 2 years worth of rainfall. So winter and spring is particularly negative when we're talking about El Nino years, when we're talking about rainfall for southwest Queensland. If you're in WA over in the Gascoyne and you were talking about El Nino, you've got to realise that it simply doesn't impact your particular location. So southwest Queensland, very much a strong impact, and especially in winter and spring. What about temperatures? So we've got that lower rainfall being more likely in winter and spring in an El Nino year. We've also got for southwest Queensland a really strong indication that our maximum temperatures over winter and spring will be much warmer than normal, right up in the sort of 8th or 7th decile. And our impact On minimum temperatures, average, no real impact on minimum temperatures. Will our winter days be warmer? Most likely. Will our winter and spring nights change? Probably not. Probably not. If you were up in the Gulf, then yes, you'd be getting cooler conditions. But for us, the maximum temperature is the only thing that's likely to be impacted in winter and spring. What about summer? Because a lot of people feel like summer is when El Nino and La Nina years really begin to make their impact. And from this map, it has very little influence over southwest Queensland over summer. I used to live up in Georgetown, up in the Gulf. And you have an El Nino year, well, your summer rainfall is likely to be impacted. You've got this signal here. But for us in southwest Queensland, by summer, El Nino's impact on rainfall is more or less diminished. And this happens from about November onwards, so that over summer, the influence of El Nino is relatively low, especially as it progresses. So once you move beyond Christmas, the El Nino impact is very negligible. So the winter and spring is the time where it's really going to impact us. And the impact on summer temperatures, again, we're going to have very little impact on our max temperatures, but we're actually noticing a bit of a signal on our minimum temperatures, slightly warmer minimum temperatures across southwest Queensland in summer. So this gives you an idea about what we could expect based off historical averages in El Nino years. Another climate driver that is worth paying attention to is the Indian Ocean Dipole, or the IOD. It's essentially looking at sea surface temperatures, but looking over in the Indian Ocean rather than the Pacific Ocean. Right now, May, white circle dot, again, was the last data point we had. We're pretty much bang on neutral. We couldn't be much closer to that 0.0 line. So currently neutral, although, and likely to be neutral again in June. The latest value, 0.34, so we're right around that neutral value, but you can certainly see that there's a pretty obvious trend towards positive conditions from about July. I can see from this model a fair degree of variation. We've even got some trending towards negative conditions. So probably less confident about this becoming a reality. And if it does, we'll only just be exceeding positive thresholds. But that is the trend that we're seeing. And that may persist until November, December 2026, a weak signal of a positive IOD event. Again, what does that mean? What does a positive IOD event mean in winter and spring? Well, if you're in the Northern Territory or South Australia, this is a massive climate driver for you. Look at the impact that it has in the Northern Territory and South Australia. It has a weaker signal for Southwest Queensland. A positive event, yes, you're probably going to end up in that fourth decile, so a little bit below median or average rainfall for spring and winter. So historically, a positive IOD event has resulted in less rainfall than average over parts of Australia, and particularly the middle of the country there, Central Australia, but also the Southwest Queensland. So we know what those climate drivers are doing. We're almost guaranteed to get an El Nino event, and it looks like we're a chance of getting a positive IOD event. What's that mean for our rainfall forecast? And before I even start showing you percentages, please remember the golden rule when it comes to climate forecasting and percentages. Let's flip every percentage. Every single percentage forecast will flip, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So let's have a look at June. You don't have to be a genius to see a lot of brown and dark orange on that map, suggesting a very low likelihood of getting above median rainfall in June. This is basically saying 10 to 20% chance of exceeding median rainfall in June. So very low likelihood. An 80% chance that we won't exceed median rainfall. That's a strong signal for June. And if we're doing, if we're looking at the actual totals, this is a 75% likelihood map. So do we have a 75% chance, or what do we think it has a 75% likelihood of occurring across southwest Queensland rainfall wise? Very little rainfall in June, 1 to 5% is what we'd be confident in getting across June. Essentially, don't hope for much rain next month. Let's look at July. We're noticing far less of that dark orange across the map, a little bit of light grey and white. Essentially, we've got a, 35 to 45% chance of exceeding median rainfall, or a sort of 55 to 65% chance that we won't exceed median rainfall. So July, slightly unfavorable forecast, but nowhere near as bleak as June was. And as we would expect, we see a little bit of a more generous rainfall allocation in the month of July, from sort of anywhere from 1 to 10 mil for a vast amount of the region. But let's look at our entire season. The months of June to August, our winter rainfall forecast. Guys, a lot of orange on the map here. A very bleak forecast, essentially saying that we've got a 20 to 30% chance of getting more than our median rainfall. That's a 70 to 80% chance that we won't get more than our median rainfall. So I want you to do that, constantly saying both of those percentages. 20 to 30% chance that we will exceed median rainfall, 70 to 80% chance we won't. That's what this graph is telling us. So we've really got to flip these percentages around to get a true idea of what we're expecting. So winter rainfall not looking overly promising for southwest Queensland. Now, I've been using the BOM forecast, but BOM isn't the only agency across Australia that we take a look at. We've also got other agencies, and this is the UK Met Office agency that does forecast for the Australasian region. So why not pull that up for the same period, winter, June to August, and have a look what they're saying. Are they singing the same song as the BOM? Or have they come up with totally different answers? Therefore, we should step back and perhaps appreciate the fact that they might have a little bit of a disagreement. Well, certainly not in this case, guys. The BOM and the UK Met Office are both saying the same thing. The UK Met Office is telling us there's a 20 to 40% chance that we get above median rainfall in winter across southwest Queensland, meaning we've got a 60 to 80% chance that we will not get more than median rainfall. So again, another negative forecast from the point of view of getting winter rainfall. But why stop there? Why stop there when we've got the tools to not only look at winter rainfall, but begin to get an idea of spring, and remembering that if we're about to go into El Nino years, and El Nino drastically impacts winter and spring rainfall for southwest Queensland, well, then it's useful for us to understand what spring's telling us. And as you can see from this time I'm using the European agency when it comes to climate forecasting. And guys, that's a pretty strong negative signal across most of central and the entirety of eastern Australia from September. So that should be September to November. As you can tell, September, October, November. I'll fix that up before I send these slides out. We're getting told, guys, a 10 to 30% chance that we get more than our median rainfall. That's telling us there's a 70 to 90% chance that we do not. One other thing to consider where we are in southwest Queensland is what we call the southern annular mode. Another climate driver, a little bit more short in terms of the time and the period that it runs over, and perhaps not something that everyone is aware of. Now, sorry, this should be during winter. We've got our winter impacts here, and we've got a positive SAM brings increased rainfall to southwest Queensland and northern New South Wales, and a negative phase brings us drier than normal conditions across southern Queensland and northern New South Wales. So the southern annular mode is something else that's worth paying attention to. So let's have a quick look at that. As you can see, the southern annular mode doesn't have impacts over months and months and months, but it's a more short-lived and shorter cycled climate driver. So this forecast is only going out to the end of June. And as you can tell at the moment, we're in a positive phase of the southern annular mode as at the 30th of May. Let's jump back. Positive phase, increased rainfall. What have we had the last 10 days, and no doubt everyone's looked at the forecast for the next few days with some showers. So it's unsurprising that in this positive phase, we're seeing more favourable conditions when it comes to getting under a little bit of rain. So we're in that positive phase at the moment, but trending towards neutral conditions. But look at the spread on this forecast. It could go anywhere really, but more than likely to head back to neutral in the month ahead. Temperature forecast is the last thing to really assess from a seasonal outlook perspective. What's June looking like? Well, drier conditions bringing with it higher than normal temperatures. Now, if you don't like the cold, perhaps you're happy to have some warmer daytime temperatures in June, but without the rainfall to accompany these conditions, it's likely to get a little bit drier faster out in southwest Queensland. What's our minimum temperature doing in June? The white on the map says it's probably going to be close to normal, which is sort of what we saw the impact of El Nino having in southwest Queensland in winter and spring. Hotter days, pretty much average nights. That's what we have here. June maxes, hotter. June mins, pretty much average. What about winter in general? June to August, this is as strong an indicator or signal as you can get for maximum temperatures. Guys, winter is going to be warmer than normal in your daytime temperatures this year across southwest Queensland, which might be good news to some. And as you can see there, a slight indication that winter nighttime temperatures will be a little bit below normal, but not as strong as our maximum temperature forecast. The last thing I wanted to share with you in terms of looking ahead, seasonal forecast wise, was the likely tercile for pasture growth. You can find this on the Long Paddock website. This takes into account rainfall, temperature, total standing dry matter conditions, and puts it all into a model that spits out what kind of pasture growth you're going to get in the months ahead. And this is June to August. This is our winter rainfall. Oh, sorry, this is our winter months. And this is in comparison to this time of the year. So if winter is a month in which you have negligible growth, well, being in the top tercile, you know, growing 100 kilos of feed versus growing 50 isn't a hell of a lot of difference. And so you've sort of got to understand it's within the context of your location and when your growing season is. It's real patchy across southwest Queensland. Anyone that got that little bit of rain earlier this month and that is enjoying that soil moisture might get a little bit of a bump. But, you know, there's red, there's grey, there's blue. It really is location specific as to what you might be getting out in your areas. So, winter 2026 for southwest Queensland. I'll be sending these slides out, or I'm happy to share these slides out through either Jed or myself. So please get in touch if you do want them. Enzo is currently neutral, but El Nino almost guaranteed to develop. Never say never, but almost guaranteed to develop. Sea surface temperatures, they're currently at neutral, but they're right at El Nino thresholds. They're likely to jump into that in this month of June and likely to persist until December. So a long event, a strong event and a long event. And the international models we have agreed with the BOM when it comes to this forecast. Our Southern Oscillation Index, our other contributor to whether or not we jump into El Nino conditions, both the 30 and 60-day values are already exceeding El Nino thresholds. So SOI is already there. It's waiting for the sea surface temperatures to join it so that we can declare the event is actually underway. What do we have in southwest Queensland when we do have El Nino conditions in winter and spring? Generally have rainfall in the second or third deciles, aka well below average. We have max temps that are above average and min temps that are generally average. And by summer, rainfall is generally average in El Nino years for southwest Queensland. Max temps are generally average, and our night times are a little bit warmer. We're in the 7th decile generally, so a little bit above average. The positive IOD, remember the positive IOD had a lot of variation in the model's forecast and a slightly positive event, though not by much. But again, something to keep our eye on. So we're at neutral at the moment, but potentially moving into a positive state by July. When we have a positive IOD event and an El Nino event occurring together, they tend to bring lower than average rainfall and higher than average temperatures to southwest Queensland. And so those two things converging are enforcing that stronger dry signal for southwest Queensland. Our rainfall forecasts, June, poor forecast. 20 to 30% chance we get more rainfall than normal, or a 70 to 80% chance we don't. July forecast, neutral, slightly unfavourable. Probably a 35 to 50% chance of exceeding median rainfall. June to August, so our winter forecast from the BOM, poor. 20 to 35% chance we exceed median rainfall. June to August from the BOM, from the UK Met Office, poor. 20 to 40% chance of exceeding median rainfall, or a 60 to 80% chance we don't. And then spring, September to October, again, should be September to November. Again, a poor forecast, even poorer than the winter forecast, a 10 to 30% chance we exceed median rainfall, or a 70 to 90% chance that we don't. Temperature outlooks, max temps likely to be above average, min temps average. And then our spring forecast, max temps above average and min temps below, more or less average. And pasture outlooks, very patchy. But what do you notice here, guys, with our rainfall forecasts? Poor, 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 from the point of view of getting any decent rainfall in winter and spring. It's not looking like the ball's in our court. It looks like the unlikely scenario will be to get any sort of significant rainfall in winter and spring. Historically speaking, that is true, and based off of the most recent forecasts that we have. So, if I was to summarize it into a sort of a nice coherent passage here, all in all, there is a clear signal from these forecasts, and that is that dry times are likely for the months ahead. Winter and spring have strong likelihoods of being warmer and drier than usual. Sort of estimated there's probably a 75% likelihood that this could occur across all of those sort of forecasts, winter and spring amalgamated together there. The indication is, 3 out of 4 times when we have this sort of conditions, we get drier times. And that still means a 25% chance that we have an all right winter and spring. But we've got to be making decisions off the likely event and putting as much of the odds in our favour as we can. An El Nino event is near certainty at this stage, and as we've seen, this has its biggest impacts on southwest Queensland in winter and spring, not in summer. You don't live in far north Queensland. El Nino doesn't affect you in summer. It is a winter and spring climate driver. Important to remember that and drive that home. Once the end of November comes and summer has arrived, you can stop listening to if we're in El Nino events or La Nina events because its time of influencing your location has come and gone. And important to note that the BOM and the UK Met Office are forecasting a typical El Nino winter, and the European agency is predicting a typical spring. So there's nothing in the forecast that we're seeing that deviates from what we have seen historically in these years. The question is, by summer, will we get some reprieve as these climate drivers and their impact on southwest Queensland diminish? Will we see some of these drier and harsher conditions sort of alleviated, and we can have a nice summer and get back to some rainfall and some pasture growth? That remains to be seen, but we will have that information in the months ahead. Now, given the forecast I've just provided, it's worth highlighting the risk of fire in El Nino years. So why does El Nino raise the risk of fire? Again, you guys will know a lot of this, but I'm just trying to piece it all together for you. During El Nino, Australia's climate tends to shift in ways that favour fire. So we've got less rainfall, we've got those higher maximum temperatures, which means we've got drier vegetation and fuel, and the potential for more fire weather days. So those days that are very encouraging when it comes to fire activities. That is the reason why the timing, spring, warmer and drier than usual, which can bring an early start to the fire season and initial outbreaks. That's, I think, is really important to note. We're not waiting till the end of spring or the end of the dry season and those hotter conditions that usually come with summer. We're likely to bring forward those dates where fire becomes a real risk due to vegetation drying out, lack of soil moisture, and a higher curing of fire. So in El Nino years, it's certainly more likely that we could have dangerous or more dangerous bushfire conditions than in neutral or La Nina years. So that would be my words of warning in terms of disaster management across southwest Queensland, will be that earlier start to the fire season or the fire risk for you guys as producers out in the rangelands there. So we provided in 35 minutes there, we've understood where we are across southwest Queensland in terms of current conditions and how that compares to other parts of the state that might be having a totally different season or last few seasons than we've had. We've now looked at the season ahead. We understand what the likely outcome is across winter and spring. It's certainly not in our favour. And now we need to feed through, or we need you to sit at home and feed through any decisions you have coming up over the next month, 3 months, or even 6 months on ground, on farm, when it comes to your landscape and your livestock, and do the decisions that you've got lined up or that you might have already had planned, are they conducive or do they make sense given the forecast we just looked at? Your disaster management planning, your breeder management, your weaner management, your buying and selling, when to spray weeds, maybe burning activities that you were going to do, or the option to sow improved pastures. What are you thinking of doing? What do you have to do in the months ahead? And how is that impacted by the forecast we just spoke about? And does it need to be tweaked? Or is it perfectly in line with it? You can continue on. This is what I think is the real advantage of just seeing these forecasts. It won't make the decision for you, but it's just another tool in your toolbox to consider when making big on-farm decisions and whether or not they make sense given what we've just looked at. Now, I'm going to use 5 minutes quickly to talk about some short-term tools. This is used for disaster management or sort of short-term decisions. So it can be disaster management, floods, fires. It might also just be about spraying weeds or putting in a fire or sowing improved pastures. Anything that happens from day to day that we can look over the not seasonal forecast, but over the next sort of 7 days. And we've got a few tools that not a lot of people know about, and I'm going to make the foolish attempt to demonstrate these in just a moment. But we've got the BOM climate tools, but we've also got the BOM agricultural services. Look at the link here. I'll send it out for anyone that needs it. We've got shorter forecasts that are updated daily. Down at the bottom right there, you see issued. We got issued on the 8th of June. This is a 4-day forecast or an 8-day forecast, or if you go forecasted rainfall, you can do 1-day forecast as well, up to 5 days ahead. So this is really valuable. And you can actually see there, southwest Queensland, guys, might be a little bit of rain coming. Might be up to 1 inch across southwest Queensland in the next 4 days. From now out to Thursday, fingers crossed. Water and land. So again, agricultural service from the BOM. We've got our wind forecast. And what's great about this, guys, we got 7 days worth of forecasting and we've got 3 hourly forecasts for that in terms of direction and strength of wind. A huge benefit for anyone that's fighting fires in particular, in terms of managing those and getting real quick, up-to-date an understanding of what's happening with wind direction. We've got something called the MEDI, which again has similar tools for looking at rainfall, wind, temperature. We got feels like temperatures that we can flick through, and again 3 hourly forecasts over a full 7 days that we can click through. So you can see here I was Wednesday at 1 o'clock and I've got a temperature for the Charleville location of 18 to 21 degrees, just like that. Wednesday 1 o'clock, I might be going out there to light a cool season burn, something like that. So hugely beneficial suite of tools. Also got Windy. Certainly not a government program, this one, but I use it all the time. I love Windy So we got rainfall here. What I love about Windy is not only the rain and thunder tab here, but the rain accumulation. You just draw out when you want the rainfall totals for. From here, we've gone from Tuesday to Friday, and we've pulled out a range there. And even better, we've got multiple models. So this is a European agency, but I could jump through to 4. So 4 plus 3 there. I've got 7 different models that I can play around with a look at rain accumulation for. And out to 14 days. I love using Windy. I use BOM. I use a multitude of different forecasting tools and programs to see if there's consistency across them. Obviously, Windy has a particular focus on wind direction. That's where it gets its name from. Similarly, I've gone here, Saturday, the 13th of June at 4 a.m. What's the wind doing? It's going 14 kilometers an hour at Charleville, and it's coming from essentially the east. The other benefit is we can press play and look at how that wind direction changes over a 14-day forecast. Another massively beneficial tool. They also do temperature. There we've got Wednesday at 1 a.m. For those of you out in Charleville, it's actually going to be quite mild, 15 degrees Celsius out in Charleville Wednesday at 1 a.m. And you simply just drag these along depending on the time that you're looking for. So some beneficial tools there. Because I've touched on fire, I thought it was worthwhile to point out NACP. I know a lot of you are using NACP, but I want to make sure that you're using it productively. So we've also got the ability in NACP to upload boundary, upload to NACP. And if you do so, you have the opportunity to receive what I receive for a few of the properties that my business owns, which is fire activity within a certain radius that you decide. So I've got it set as a 50-kilometer radius around the property where I want to know if there's other fires occurring. The moment there is a fire within that radius, I'm getting an email notification first thing. And so I'm able to manage fires within the region by uploading a boundary into NACP and setting that notification, which is something I recommend doing to save yourself having to constantly monitor NACP once fires do start to pop up around your area. Now, I was going to just try to do a live demo, and then I'll take some questions from everyone here. So, are you still with me, Jed?
Yeah, mate, loud and clear. Thank you very much. Keep going. Yep, all good.
Beautiful. Now, I'll come back to this one. Here's quickly running you through the agricultural services total rainfall piece. So we've got
John,
today.
Sorry for interrupting there, mate. When you're in here, we've just had a question about how to find the median rainfall for each month. Is that an example you can do in here at the moment?
I should be able to do that just fine.
It puts you on the spot. Yeah. Thanks, mate.
Yep, I'll see how the live demo goes. So we'll go through that. I would generally like to show median rainfalls, but when you're doing a whole region, it's hard. When I'm in a particular spot doing a field day, say I was in Bolin, I'd always be using the median value for that and going above or below it, but I'll certainly pull those up. You can see here we've got forecasted rainfall for each day of this week. Total forecast rainfall. This is for the next 4 days, the 4 days after that, and then the total 8-day rainfall. So if you're looking at forecasts, I prefer to use this one for 8-day forecasted rainfall. It gets updated more regularly. So this is what I use. And as I said, link in the presentation. Now, total forecasted wind. We can jump through to Thursday at 1600 hours, Friday, 2200 hours. We can flick through that on the agricultural services tab and get lots of different wind directions and wind strengths and wind speeds, sorry. And we can sort of play that through and look at how that is impacting. So play moves you through it. Hugely beneficial tool. Some people prefer Med-Eye. The feels like temperature, the daily maximum temperatures. If you've got decisions that are impacted a lot by temperature, this is a great one. It also has wind forecasts as well and rainfall forecasts also. People just tend to gravitate towards the one that resonates with them the best visually or information-wise. Here's a great little tool here for flicking through 3-hourly sort of sets of time and looking at different likelihoods in terms of 50% chance of occurring, 25% chance. So Med-Eye is great for that. Here's probably the most visually appealing, windy. If I jump in and press rain and thunder, this is what we have currently occurring across Queensland. Not much, a few light showers on the coast, but this rain accumulation piece is as easy as going, well, what rain are we getting between now and Friday at midnight? And boom, it pops up on the map for us. Now, if I want to look at, let's look at Roma for something different. There we go, 20.5 mils. Now, what I said in the presentation was that you can use multiple different agencies and their forecasts. This is a European agency at the moment, but what about Access? That is the BOM forecast. What's it telling us? Well, less exciting, but still some rain there. And we've got different international agencies and their forecast, but everyone's sort of thinking, besides this one here, we've got a strong indication of rainfall in the next couple of days. And so that's what I really like about the Windy app, is the ability to drag this so freely out to 14 days worth of rainfall. So I love myself some Windy. Now, when we're doing longer term forecasting, which is what this is the BOM page, but for climate, not agriculture. Agriculture focuses on these shorter sort of 4 to 8 day forecasts. The climate BOM page is a lot more focused about, what can we expect for winter? So we've got here 3 months, June to August. And what people don't know about this is that you really should be clicking on your location. And that brings up this. So the question we just had there was, what is the median for Charleville? So the median for winter is usually 74.1 mils. So the chance of getting above our median is about 25%. So we have a 75% chance that we get below median conditions. The thing that scares me about this forecast is that we've got a more than 50% chance that we're actually in that unusually dry set of conditions, which is below 30 mil. So we got a 55% chance that we get below 31 mils of rainfall. This is the part of the BOM that not a lot of people know about, is the ability to click in at these points and get, as you just asked for, Jed, that idea about median rainfall, and then being able to sort of understand, okay, we know it's going to be below median, or we know it's more likely to be below median rainfall. So what is median rainfall? Now let's jump out to Quilpie. Over that same period, June, 47 mils is the median. Our chance of getting unusually dry conditions below 17 mils, we've got a 33% chance of that. So that's pretty significant. And again, just a 25% chance we get above our median. So you can see the chance of getting, wildly wet conditions above sort of 77 mils is a 6% chance. So always click in on your particular location. You have the luxury of doing so. Now, preempting a question that was sent in about accuracy maps. And this is incredibly important. It's a fantastic question. I absolutely love that it was asked. Past accuracy. Understanding that given your location and the climate drivers that are active at that time, remember that El Nino events in winter and spring give a really strong signal, which means we get better at predicting winter and spring rainfall when we have an El Nino event. So you can see here that our 3-month winter rainfall forecast about being above median rainfall or below it, we've got a very strong accuracy here in southwest Queensland for predicting winter rainfall in southwest Queensland. So we're well above 75 to 100% of the time getting that correct. Now, if I was up where I used to live in Georgetown and they were predicting above median rainfall for winter, I'd look at this and go, to be honest, you don't have much of a track record of predicting that correctly. for winter in North Queensland, because North Queensland doesn't have any active climate drivers across the region in that time, and it has essentially no rainfall. And so getting it right about whether it's above it or below the normal level is very difficult. Southwest Queensland is actually the darkest green for winter. So if there was a time where the BOM gets things right in Southwest Queensland, it's generally in winter. What if we went from July to September? Again, a pretty strong likelihood of success. So if you wanted to go into these, have a look at the rainfall forecast for June to August and go, oh, they're predicting, 25% chance that we exceed median rainfall, so a 75% chance that we don't. Well, we better make sure that they've got any clue what they're talking about. Oh, yeah, look, they're actually pretty good at doing winter rainfall in my area. I wouldn't believe it if I was in the Territory, if I was up in the northern part of the Northern Territory or anywhere across that top end there. Not a very good track record, but for Southwest Queensland, they've got a pretty good track record of doing so. And so that is where you look at those historical accuracies. And again, if you want to look across all seasons, we can have a look at median rainfall. We can have a look at months 1 to 3. So this is saying from the 1st of October, and they're predicting out October, November, December. Initialized on the 1st of September. So we're doing, we're looking at a forecast on the 1st of September, and it's for October to December. We've got a 55, we've got a better than 50% chance that the forecast is correct. And you can fiddle through this and go, what times of the year are they particularly bad at it? So March. Some locations just have a decent success rate. The notorious areas, the Gascoyne over in WA, where they just can't seem to get any real accuracy. Look, in November they get a little bit, but for big chunks of the year there, the forecasts are generally very poor. So this is where you can look at the BOM's past records for your location. Very important to do so. Always checking in. They're quite upfront and honest about when they get things right and about how often. So look at the forecast, look at the past accuracy map, and then make a decision based off of that. So 7:01. Thank you all for attending. I'm happy to answer questions for a couple of minutes now. I wish you well in the season ahead. If any of you wanted to head to the NACP website, there is this Climate Savvy for Grazing Management in Southwest Queensland. It's a very short sort of 4-page document that you can download, and it tells you what drivers are active for your area, when do they impact it, what should you be looking at and when. So a really useful little resource for anyone in that area. Otherwise, if there was a couple of questions, I'm more than happy to spend a couple of minutes answering them. Otherwise, I'm all done.
So that is all for this evening. John, thank you very much. Good evening, and until next time.
Beautiful. Thanks, mate.